The next 15 months will be the most important 15 months of not only Lane Kiffin's career, but also Ole Miss football. We'll explain.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. More importantly, Ole Miss every day. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I hope everybody has a good Friday and into the weekend. When we come back on Monday, we will have essentially 1 week left until SEC Media Days, and we'll be pretty fired up about that. We've had some pretty good shows over the last couple of weeks, so we're pretty fired up with what we've been able to do. But as SEC Media Days gets closer, it's going to start to get a little easier, potentially. All right. So Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss are faced with a 15 months that they're perfectly positioned right now to get to where they need to be. There's other schools that are not positioned like that. There's going to be a struggle to try and get them in the best condition possible for the 2024 season, but they're not going to be in position to take it full advantage of the 2024 season. Ole Miss is not that program, and if you look at their college football news preview, they talk about how Lane Kiffin, over the last 3 seasons, what SEC program has the third most overall wins behind Alabama and Georgia? The answer is Ole Miss. And that is putting Lane Kiffin in unique company. Cutcliffe had a nice run in the early 2000s. Hugh Freeze made things interesting for a stretch, but since the end of the Johnny Vaught era, 1970, not counting when he stepped out in for part of the 73 season, the program's most successful head coach has been Lane Kiffin. He's known for being brash, outspoken, and with a perspective on college football that flies in the face of ultra serious zero fun attitude of the SEC, but Kiffin is also a well of a football coach that has won 64% of his games so far in a short stint. Freeze and Cutcliffe were around 60%, and yes, with his 23 victories over the last 3 seasons under Kiffin, Ole Miss has been the third winningest program in the SEC. Now, we are previewing a little bit later on in the episode. In segment 3, we're going to talk about the Ole Miss LSU game. And it's no surprise that they rate the Ole Miss LSU game as a key game this season. Now, if Ole Miss wants this season to go extremely well, this is probably a game they need to win. It's going to be daunting. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted to point out that other people are pointing towards that LSU game as a key game on the Rebels schedule. Their key to the season, run for lots of yards on every carry. Last year, Ole Miss was the third-rated rushing offense in college football behind 2 service academies. Not necessarily a bad place to be. They ran the ball really well. And, whenever you look at this, this is the reason it's going to be so important moving forward, all right? They're already starting this. We're getting ready for the 2023 season. We haven't even had media days for it, and there's already been posts going on for months about the 2024 season, okay? Whether it's the fact that the playoff is expanding to 12 teams, Texas and Oklahoma coming into the conference, they've already released opponents and schedules for the 2024 season. That is how much of a public interest that it has at the moment. Now, we say all that to say this. Lane Kiffin, over the next 15 months, has a chance. For Ole Miss, they're going to compete for playoffs. The 12-team playoff, Ole Miss is going to compete for entrance in that. You already have a team that has one of the best quarterback rooms in the country in a sport that is dominated by quarterback play. You don't go very far if you don't have a good one. Ask Auburn. Ask Florida. So them having that quarterback room is going to be pretty special. Now, we're expecting Jaxson Dart to take a jump this year. Heck, I did a podcast yesterday looking at that, and they started ranking the top quarterbacks in the SEC, and they had Jaxson Dart third. And you could honestly argue effectively that he should be at the top of that list. So we're expecting Jaxson Dart to take a jump this year, but he also has a year of eligibility after this year. It is fully possible that Jaxson Dart is the quarterback of the Ole Miss Rebels in 2024. Fully possible. But if not, if for some reason Jaxson Dart goes pro or transfers or anything in modern college football to where the quarterback position can derail your team, Lane Kiffin has done a phenomenal job, whether it's Walker Howard or Austin Simmons, of recruiting for the 2024 season. They're going to have a talented quarterback at the helm in 2024. That is not a worry. Quinshon Judkins is the best running back in college football. He is going to be there this year. He is going to be back here next year. You have a situation where position rooms are taking effect. Centarian Perkins on the defensive side of the ball. This year is going to be his true freshman year. 2024, he is posed for a breakout year. And we have told this, and my everydayers can attest to this, that everything was pointing towards that 2024 season. And if everything breaks just right, honestly, it doesn't need to break just right. It just needs to break right. Ole Miss will have a chance to not only compete at the highest level possible in the playoff, but also have a chance to go to Atlanta, even with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. People talk about, hey, the SEC is going to get harder to win because Texas and Oklahoma is coming in. Well, yeah, that's a does statement, but there's very few teams that are in better shape for Ole Miss to compete with those teams than right now. Third winningest program over the last 3 years in the SEC, behind Alabama and Georgia. Exactly where you want to be. They've gone to a Sugar Bowl. They've won an Outback Bowl. Last year they had the Texas Bowl, but weirdness happened at the end of the last season. I honestly views the end of the last season as sabotage, honestly. And Lane Kiffin came through that. He chose Ole Miss over like $12 million a year. Some ludicrous amount of money is what was offered. We don't know exactly what happened, but that was a huge amount of money. But he chose to stay at Ole Miss. And they're actively working on this 15-month program right now. It's the most important 15 months of Lane Kiffin's career. This will be the first time that he's gone 4 years at a school after this season. And with 2024 being the playoff, there's not many places he can go. Now, I do expect some drama during the season again this year because of this reason. Whenever you put Lane Kiffin in a headline, it does better than when you don't. So when there's a coaching search, they're going to put Lane Kiffin in the headline. It's a weird phenomenon, but it just happens. But with Ole Miss going through this season, and I've told you, I think this offense has a chance to be really explosive. I think this defense has a chance to be clunky, but really flashing good in areas. I think this is the schematic year to get ready for 2024. I think the players are going to be in place for 2024. I think the coaches are going to be in place for 2024. This year is about maximizing. I'm not saying this year does not matter. Maximize this year and put yourself in the best position for 2024. Example, this is what I'm talking about. Let's say for whatever reason Ole Miss starts off 3-3 this year. They end up dropping the game to Alabama, LSU, and Arkansas, or something like that, with Arkansas left to go, or Auburn left to go on the schedule, and a whole bunch of games where the season could go off the rails. It'll be important at that moment probably to put Walker Howard in the lineup for quarterbacking, to get him game experience so he's fully ready to go at the start of 2024. Or Austin Simmons, or whoever the backup quarterback, the second quarterback is going to be. Because at that point, it's become about the future. You want to make a bowl game. I don't care if you go 6-6 at that point, but those reps are going to be what's important. Now, we're going to talk in the second segment. We're going to have a William Echoles breakdown from Brian Smith. He's going to talk about that for a little bit. And in the third segment, we're going to do our game-by-game breakdown of LSU and what I think is going to happen going into the season in early July. So we will talk about that as well. But first, I do want to let you know, I want to thank you for making the FanDuel Sportsbook app the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. And you can take your first swing at betting MLB at FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount back in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to whoever you think is going to hit the first home run. And it's all in an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And plus, when you win, you kind of get paid instantly, and we all like that as well. Now, I do realize that Mississippi is a brick-and-mortar casino sports gambling state, and that if you want to gamble on sports, you have to go to a casino. But if you're in Louisiana or if you're in Tennessee, you can use the FanDuel Sports app. New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, Delta, Louisiana, Memphis, Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. You can use those with the FanDuel Sports app. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 back. FanDuel, it's an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Please subscribe there. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we've talked about it, William Echoles, and I told you that we were going to have Brian Smith on and where he could break down the film a little bit. And we finally got that video today, so we wanted to put that up and let it marinate a little bit over the weekend and give people an opportunity to see it. Now, Brian Smith was like, hey, just like everybody else, when they looked at William Echoles' profile, it was like, okay, I need to look at him as an offensive lineman. And I had to say, no, please break him down as a defensive lineman, because these sites have rated him as an offensive lineman, but they kind of did a disservice as well. But here's Brian Smith talking about William Echoles from Houston High School, Mississippi, Ole Miss's latest commitment.
How's it going, Ole Miss fans? This is Brian Smith, and I want to discuss a certain recruit that there's been a little bit of interest in on what position he's going to play and how he's going to play it, why they want him there for the Ole Miss Rebels. Will Echoles, he plays offensive line and defensive line, but usually when you hear those two distinctions put in the same sentence, it usually goes O-line, probably 95% of the time, and many people recruited this young man to play on the offensive side of the football, and that's fine. I was skeptical as well. I was asked to take a look at this film, see what I thought, kind of go over it, and just look at it from a perspective of where does he fit best on the defensive side and what can he do? Fair enough. A couple backdrops here. He's a northern Mississippi kid. He's played high school football in Mississippi. He knows what it's like to go against big guys. He has the frame to be a true one-tech/zero tech. Think if you're familiar with the terminologies like 3-4 defense, 3-3-5. He could be the guy right in the middle if you wanted him to be and play over the center in some capacity. But he's also, this is before I get into the film, and I'll share my screen here in just a second. Will is a player that has been overlooked as a defensive lineman, in my opinion, for one primary reason. The difference between an O-line and a D-line usually is the following. Can they break down and change direction suddenly? That's a checkbox. If you cannot, even a nose guard, while they still have value because there's only so many human beings big enough to play that spot, that also means you can be a one-gap guy, and then that opens Pandora's box, if you will. I know that phrase is overused, but this is what I think. Based on what I saw, and again, I'm going to show the film here in a second, he's a guy that They could use in a 3-man line situation. They could play him at 3-tech in a 4-man line. I know we're getting complicated here, but they could move him around and do different things because he's athletic enough and he bends well enough below the waist to get into the backfield and make plays. Running backs see a 300-pound man coming at them. They are going to move laterally. They do not want to get hit by these guys. Therefore, you have to chase them down and change direction. It is not easy. Now, think about the guys in the Southeastern Conference at LSU and Auburn and A&M, et cetera. Every one of these guys that's in the starting lineup, barring injury or just being an idiot off the field, is at the very least going to go to the NFL Combine 9 times out of 10. There's some rare exceptions, but even like Vanderbilt's had guys in the last 10 years that have went to the Combine at running back. I forget the kid's name a couple of years ago, but that's how much depth there is in the Southeastern Conference at running back. And that is the first thing for a massive man like this guy to make it. He's about 6'3", 295, give or take. So Echols has the ability to do that. Whether or not he can be a pass rusher, I need to see more of, but give him a little bit of thought on the following here. Once you concentrate on a position, one, and you learn to master it, whether it's O-line, D-line, receiver, corner, safety, whatever, life's a lot easier. A high school player, I think he's at Houston High School, if I remember correctly, in Mississippi. Not that it matters, but when you get a kid like this, you're going to play him on everything. Why? Because you're not going to get another guy like that anytime soon. You're going to play him on special teams. You're going to play him O-line. You're going to play him D-line. There are schools that use kids like this at tight end and fullback. He's going to play D-line for the Rebels. That matters. So they're going to get him, and maybe as a junior or senior, they do some funky stuff with him on offense because he's such a good athlete. Maybe they throw him a pass or something. Anything's possible with Lane Kiffin. Never forget that. By the way, if you do not follow Lane Kiffin's Twitter, that's on you. One of the greatest things in the history of mankind is Lane Kiffin's Twitter. That being stated, I'm going to show the film now, but keep in mind, can you break down and change direction? That's a checkbox. This guy showed some signs of that, and I'm curious. I'm curious to see how that develops once he gets to Ole Miss and he gets big-time college coaching that's focused on one main task, playing D-line, and has the ability to focus on that and just get better with technique, in learning scheme, studying film, and all of the above. So let's watch Mr. Echols play some ball. This is from his junior year. Will, on this very first play, it's a goal line play, so it's a rather important one, if you will. I mean, he picks the kid up. I kind of feel bad for him, and he just throws him down. To say that Will Echoles is a powerful young man would be the understatement of the millennium. If you watch there, he got the sack just by using a two-hand power bull rush. No move, really. Look at him knock the guy back. When you see an offense, I mean, whoever 53 is for the other team, that's a big football player. He just smacked him. Right there, change direction in the backfield. Very important for Will's future playing for the Rebels. Love that right there. Again, broke down, moved laterally, found a way to make the tackle, and got the ball carrier on the ground. That's pretty instinctive right there. Final clip I'll show here. But again, watch him. Look at that with the swim and the hit. That's pretty good stuff. So to put it back in perspective here, Will Echoles is a guy that was kind of overlooked. Now, they already got a couple. They got Rush and they got Beavers, two really good defensive linemen. Both could play inside. But if you get guys and you're going to play some three-man and do different things, which most teams are, LSU and everybody does now, it's circumstantial based on who you play. Alabama, everybody has their own little niche. Like Georgia ran double eagle a couple years ago against Alabama in the championship game. It's basically a five-man line, but two of them are standing up. There's all kinds of nuances. You need a gazillion defensive linemen. If you had 20, you wouldn't have enough. Obviously, you can't do that, but that's why defensive linemen are so coveted in recruiting. rotate, 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 rotate. And you know what? Rotate some more. You need size. You need athletes constantly coming on and off the field against these spread offenses. That's why I think Echols is a really big pickup, because he has high upside. I have no idea how well he's going to develop. That's up to him and Ole Miss. But you can't teach the size. You can't teach the change of direction. And most importantly, he's a guy that just played hard. Man, you got to play hard if you're up front in the SEC. That is a trench league. So I really like him, and I think he's a kid that's going to end up being a really good football in the SEC. Please like this podcast. Please subscribe. Please hit that notification bell. And if you got something to say, let it rip, man. Happy to talk some Rebels football. Take care. Have a great day.
That was Brian Smith talking William Echoles, breaking down the film and all of that, talking about what a scout sees when they look at a player like William Echoles. And he's absolutely right. It's Houston High School. It's Mississippi High School. The best players play everywhere. They do everything. Like Santarian Perkins returned punts, and he probably long snapped and kicked off last season as well. In Mississippi and most high school football, great players play everywhere because they always want them on the field. It just kind of is what it is. When we come back, we are going to talk LSU Ole Miss football from this season, or for this season, I should say. We're going to break down what's going to happen, and we're going to do, as part of our W's and L's, break down the Ole Miss schedule as well. So stick around. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. So please feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and we are doing W's and L's and game previews of Ole Miss's schedule. And today, we are up to LSU. Now, the LSU Tigers have a lot going for them. A lot of people are really excited about what they can be, and I don't know if it's necessarily coming down to the offense. Although Jaden Daniels is a very toolsy player. If he plays well, LSU is going to be tough to beat. And you need to realize, they returned 8 starters, including every offensive lineman and one of the best young tight ends in Mason Taylor. A wealth of talent returns at wide receiver. They lost only Keyshawn Boutte, but they do have Malik Neighbors, who had a 1,000-yard season last year. Brian Thomas had 361, was the top touchdown producer at the position. And Louisiana native and Alabama transfer Aaron Anderson is expected to be a top target. Now, if you look at the defensive side of the ball, it gets interesting because all of the headlines are going to be about Harold Perkins, and he's literally the first name that comes up. He was unstoppable at times as a freshman last season. He returns as one of the top linebackers in the country after recording 72 tackles, 7.5 sacks, 13 for loss, all team highs. Greg Penn III is actually LSU's top returning tackler at 78, but he'll have a tough battle to beat out Oregon State's transfer Omar Spates. Now, this is interesting. Everybody knows that Harold Perkins was a dude last year. But the thing that most people overlook is that Mason Smith hurt himself with a knee injury in the opener against Florida State. So now I do say that ACL injuries are generally 18-month injuries, and especially with a big guy. So he's probably not going to be as explosive as he was before the Florida State game, especially when they play Ole Miss in the season. But he's going to get better and better in the course of the season, and by the end of the year, this LSU defense could be very, very salty. Defensive tackle Mako Wingo, he was an All-American selection last year in Smith's absence. LSU has a salty defense. Now, this is really interesting, and the question that always gets asked is what wins, offense or defense? And whenever you're going to deal with Ole Miss that has a chance to be very explosive against an LSU defense, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how that goes as well. Remember, LSU beat Ole Miss last year, but Ole Miss did not have Zach Evans in that game. And when Zach Evans was not in the lineup for Ole Miss, that offense was a different animal. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. Now, their final analysis from Athlon says if the defense comes together, which it should, with the players LSU has returning on offense, there's more question marks in my opinion there. The Tigers could be the favorites to repeat as West champions. I kind of agree with that. They can take a step further and make the college football playoff. They have to win and be more successful than they were last year, and Jaden Daniels has to be completely unreal. At a minimum, they'd have to split Florida State and Alabama and run the table in the other 10 games. They're saying 11-1 is the necessary thing for the playoff. Their national preseason ranking is 6th. Now, if you look at their schedule, they've got an interesting, favorable schedule set up, but Ole Miss playing after Arkansas is a beneficial thing, not because of physicality or anything like that, but just because that LSU is going to have to focus on it. It's a weird schedule. They go Mississippi State in Starkville, at home, Arkansas. They play Ole Miss in Oxford, go to Columbia, play Auburn at home. So it's a 5-game set that is probably going to be fairly difficult for LSU, even though we expect LSU to be pretty good. The Ole Miss LSU matchup predictor, ESPN FPI, has LSU at a 66% chance of winning. Ole Miss at a 33% chance. Should be quite interesting. Now, I said whenever we started this, I expect Ole Miss to win one of the games that they are supposed to lose, and they are going to lose a game that they are supposed to win. This is the game that I think Ole Miss gets. Now, if you look at whenever we broke down the Alabama game, all the factors are in place to where you would think that would be the game that Ole Miss would get. But until Ole Miss wins in Alabama, that's one of those things I just need to see it. I just need to see that over and over again because I saw 2015, but after that, it was kind of a house of horrors. Ole Miss has much better success against LSU and Oxford. It used to be a situation where Ole Miss played well in Baton Rouge, but that's kind of gone away in recent years. But they do play LSU pretty well in Oxford. They won in 2021 or 2022 or something. 2021. Matt Corral and those guys with the powder blue jerseys. I think that was the Manning game, if I'm not mistaken, when Eli got his number retired. But going after the first week of us breaking down this, Ole Miss, in my opinion, is going to be 4-1 at the end of September. What do you think Ole Miss is going to be at the end of September? Whenever you look at those 4 games, how do you expect the start to go for the Ole Miss Rebels? Put that down in the comment and let me know. And we're going to get into October, where there's 3 games in October. We should get to the Georgia game next week. And then during SEC Media Days, the last 2 games. So you can see I kind of planned all this stuff as well. So thank you very much for tuning into the show. I hope everybody has a safe and happy weekend and has a lot of fun and does whatever they need to do. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for basically making this show a monster on the charts at the moment. Ole Miss has a small fan base, and we are punching so far above our weight right now. We're the only Ole Miss show that you see. And that is a cool thing, and it is all because of you. Thank you very much for that. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every dayers, tune in tomorrow. Brian Smith is going to be talking a little bit more about William Echoles. We're going to do the top Mississippi prospects. We're going to do the recruiting show that we usually do. It'll be back on Saturday morning. Also, Tom Vanderford Sunday night will appear, and Derek Vandegrift is also scheduled to appear on Saturday night to talk about the Major League Baseball draft, kind of give you a little preview of that as well. Monday, when we get back, we will continue to start working down the schedule. We'll move into the month of October whenever it hits as well. So we're pretty fired up about really everything that is going on. We're very thankful, and thank you so much for it. I do hope, like I said, I hope everybody has a good weekend. We'll see you then. Hotty toddy.